Hobgrots are really fun to paint. They're full of nasty, spiteful character, and the skin is an interesting challenge as it's not the usual bright green of orcs and goblins. In this video, I show you how I got mine off the desk and onto the battlefield in no time, with contrast paints and some simple highlights. Let's get started. I've prepared my model by gluing sand on the base and undercoating it with wraithbone, as I'll be using contrast paints for all the base layers and so want a light colour to work from. To begin, I cover all the skin with snakebite leather, thinned with equal parts contrast medium. The colour would be a little too stark for what I want straight from the pot. I work my way all around the model, being as neat as possible. It doesn't matter if you get any on the armour, as we'll be painting over this, but try not to spill onto any other areas. Anywhere the paint is pooling thicker than you'd like, just soak up the excess with your brush and redeposit it elsewhere. Next, with wildwood, I paint the straps around the waist and neck, being very careful not to get it onto the skin. For the knotted ropes hanging from the waists, I use Flesh Tearer's red contrast. With those areas base coated, I turn my attention to the metals. First, the armour plates and any weapon blades or grenades are painted in a layer of iron hand steel. To shade this, I apply a layer of Garaghak sewer diluted heavily with 3 parts contrast medium. This gives a perfect oily, dirty metal effect, and if you've seen any of my videos before, you'll know it's one of my favourite ways of shading steel. I also use this to cover any pouches on the models. I then heavily dilute Scrag Brown and apply this around any rivets or into joins between armour plates, to emphasise the build-up of rust. This dries much subtler than it looks now, so if you want a stronger effect, just apply a second layer when the first is dry. For any weapon handles and the rune-etched plates hanging from the Hobgrots' bodies, I base coat these with Screaming Bell. I then shade them all over with Carroburg Crimson. And finally, to shade them further, I paint the bottom halves with Agrax Earthshade. And with that done, all base coating and shading is finished. You already have a perfectly good tabletop standard model if you want to leave it here, but next we're going to turn to highlights. First, I layer back over the skin with an equal parts mix of Baneblade Brown and Kislev Flesh. I use this to effectively sketch over most of the skin, leaving the shading in the recesses and starting to understand where the higher areas I'm going to highlight in the next stages are. This also lets me smooth over anywhere the contrast paint left an uneven finish. Next, with pure Kislev Flesh, I apply smaller highlights, focusing on the more defined muscles and raised areas. On larger muscles like the shoulders, I apply the Kislev Flesh as striations to start creating the appearance of individual muscle fibres. Next, with Screaming Skull, I apply even finer highlights, accentuating the muscle edges and highest points even more. And finally, with an equal parts mix of Screaming Skull and Skull White, I spot highlight the most prominent points where I want the eye to be drawn. The knuckles, nose, cheeks and chin, knees and elbows, and the edges of the most defined muscles. I also use this to pick out any scars and popping veins. At this point, I want to add a little more colour to the skin, so I apply Magos Purple over the areas I just highlighted with my brightest mix. I then apply a second layer of my highlight mixture, slightly smaller, back over this. I now have a really simple effect, suggesting blood flowing beneath the skin and have some really bruised looking scars and welts. With black Templar contrast, I paint over the nails and teeth. And also paint into the eye sockets. I pick out the individual nails and teeth with Dawnstone, and then apply a dot highlight with grey Seer at the top point. This makes the nails look nice and sharp. I paint the eyeballs with Wild Rider Red at this point. For the knotted ropes, I pick out the individual twists with Wild Rider Red. This takes a while but is really worth it. Just take your time and use as fine a brush as possible. And then I apply as fine a dot as possible in the very centre of each twist with Ethereal Yellow. This really makes the ropes pop. I pick out the individual fibres of the straps with Baneblade Brown. And then a smaller highlight with Karak Stone, focusing more towards the centre of each individual fibre, and edge highlighting any folds on the pouches. And finally, I apply spot highlights with Screaming Skull. For the steel armour and weapons, I edge highlight everything with Stormhost Silver. On any flatter areas, you can also apply some dots and scratches to create the appearance of pitted and beaten metal. With Sycorax Bronze, I edge highlight any bronze plaques and the weapon handles. And finally, I spot highlight the very corners and any rivets with Stormhost Silver to emphasise these further. And there we are, done in no time at all. I've painted up a few to show you the finished effect across a full unit. The models really are full of devious character. I'll be looking at further orcs and goblin models across some future videos. For now, all that remains is to thank my members. Your support really means so much. Please do consider becoming a member yourself if you enjoyed this video, and like and subscribe to be notified when my next tutorial drops or suggest what you'd like to see me paint next. I'll see you next time, and until then, happy painting.